Silence is not empty. Silence is loaded. In a world addicted to noise, the quiet mind holds the advantage. While others rush to speak, react, explain, defend, and prove, the disciplined individual waits, watches, decides. This audiobook is not about saying nothing. It is about saying less and controlling more. Because here is the truth most people never learn. The person who speaks first often loses. The person who reacts fastest often loses. The person who explains the most often loses, and the one who understands silence wins without force. Welcome to The Art of Strategic Silence. This is not about being passive. This is about commanding presence. This is not about hiding your voice. This is about weaponizing restraint. This audiobook will teach you how silence creates leverage, how stillness exposes weakness, how calm destabilizes manipulation, and how saying nothing at the right moment gives you control over outcomes, people, and yourself. If you have ever spoken too soon, reacted too emotionally, or explained yourself only to lose respect afterward, this is for you. Because power is not loud. Power is unmoved. Chapter 1. Silence is pressure. Most people think silence is absence. They are wrong. Silence is pressure. When you stop filling space with words, something strange happens. The room shifts. The other person becomes uncomfortable. Their mind starts racing. They wonder what you are thinking. They replay their words. They question their position. They feel exposed. That discomfort is not weakness. That discomfort is leverage. Human beings crave feedback, approval, reassurance, reaction. When you deny them that, they start revealing themselves. This is the first law of strategic silence. The person who needs clarity first holds less power. Weakness rushes to explain. Strength waits. When you speak too quickly, you give information away. When you react emotionally, you give access away. When you over-explain, you give leverage away. And leverage is everything. Think about negotiations. The strongest negotiator doesn't argue first. They pause. They let the silence stretch. And in that silence, the other side talks. They justify. They soften. They reveal urgency. Because silence forces people to fill the gap. And when people fill gaps, they expose truth. Chapter 2. The fear of silence. Why do most people talk too much? Not because they are confident, because they are uncomfortable. They speak to relieve tension. They speak to be liked. They speak to prove value. They speak to avoid being misunderstood. That is not confidence. That is anxiety leaking through language. Silence feels dangerous to insecure minds. It feels like rejection, like judgment, like loss of control. But for the disciplined mind, silence is control. Silence says, I am not rushed. I am not moved. I am not seeking approval. I decide when this moment advances. And people feel that immediately. They may not understand it, but they respect it. The world does not respect noise. The world respects certainty, and certainty does not shout. Chapter 3. Speaking is a transaction. Every word you speak costs something. It costs attention. It costs leverage. It costs position. Most people speak as if words are free. They are not. Every unnecessary sentence lowers impact. Every rushed explanation weakens authority. Every emotional reaction hands control to someone else. Silence, on the other hand, costs nothing and gains everything. Silence protects your position. Silence preserves mystery. Silence keeps your inner world guarded. And what cannot be read cannot be controlled. Here is a truth that will change how you move through conversations. Scarcity creates value. If you speak constantly, your words blend into noise. If you speak selectively, your words become signal. The quiet voice lands harder because people are not used to hearing it. Chapter 4. The pause. That shifts power. There is a moment in every interaction where power shifts. It happens after someone finishes speaking, and before you respond. That pause, that breath, that silence, is where authority is decided. Most people rush to respond. They fear awkwardness. They fear losing momentum. They fear being perceived as weak. But the pause does three critical things. It lowers emotional temperature. It gives you time to think. And it forces the other person to sit with their own words. Sometimes they keep talking, and when they do, they reveal more than they intended. Silence does not interrupt truth. Silence extracts it. Chapter 5. Silence is a boundary. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is a boundary. When you do not immediately defend yourself, you communicate self-respect. When you do not react to provocation, you communicate control. When you do not explain your decisions, you communicate certainty. And certainty shuts down debate. People push boundaries to see where they bend. Silence teaches them where they stop. When someone pressures you and you pause, you reclaim the frame. When someone provokes you and you remain calm, you end the game. Because manipulation requires feedback, and silence starves manipulation. You have now seen the surface of strategic silence. But what happens when silence is used under pressure? When emotions rise? When provocation is intentional? That is where most people fail, and where mastery begins. Because silence is easy when things are calm. The real test comes when someone tries to move you, and that is where we go next. Chapter 6. Silence under pressure. Silence is easy when nothing is at stake. The real challenge comes when emotions rise, when someone disrespects you, when they provoke, when they try to rush you into reacting. That is when silence becomes discipline, because your instinct will scream at you to respond, to correct, to defend, to win the moment. But strategic silence is not about winning moments. It is about winning outcomes. Pressure reveals who controls themselves and who does not. Most people lose power the second they feel threatened. Their voice tightens, their words speed up, their explanations grow longer, their emotions leak into language, and once emotions take the wheel, leverage is gone. Silence interrupts that cycle. When you pause instead of reacting, you break expectation. When you stay calm instead of escalating, you disarm aggression. When you say nothing instead of defending, you confuse manipulation. Because provocation feeds on reaction, and silence denies it fuel. Chapter 7. The emotional economy. Every interaction is an exchange of energy. Anger wants attention. Ego wants validation. Insecurity wants reassurance. Silence refuses to pay those costs. When someone tries to bait you, they want a response, not truth. When someone challenges you publicly, they want to elevate themselves, not resolve anything. Silence exposes that motive. It forces the other person to sit alone with their intent. And here is what most people do not realize. Not every challenge deserves an answer. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every opinion deserves your energy. Silence is how you choose what matters. It says, "This is not worth my reaction. This does not control me. This moment does not define me." That is emotional authority. Chapter 8. Silence as psychological weight. When you remain silent, people project. They assume, they imagine, they fill in the blanks with their own fears. Silence becomes a mirror, and most people do not like what they see. They wonder, did I say too much? Did I cross a line? What are they thinking right now? The longer the silence, the heavier it feels. That weight shifts power without a single word spoken. This is why the calmest person in the room often becomes the center of gravity. Not because they demand attention, but because attention drifts towards certainty. Silence signals inner stability, and stability creates authority. Chapter 9. Strategic silence versus emotional withdrawal. There is a difference between silence and avoidance. Avoidance runs from discomfort. Strategic silence holds discomfort. Avoidance hides. Strategic silence observes. When you use silence intentionally, you are present, not passive. You listen more than you speak. You watch body language. You note tone shifts. You read intent. And when you finally speak, it lands. Because you are not guessing, you are responding with precision. That is the difference between noise and influence. Chapter 10. Timing is everything. Silence is not permanent. It is timed. Knowing when to speak matters as much as knowing when not to. The mistake many people make is breaking silence too early. They rush to fill space. They rush to regain comfort. But silence gains strength with patience. Let the moment stretch. Let the other person finish revealing themselves. Let clarity arrive before response. Then, and only then, speak. And when you do, say less than expected. Short sentences. Calm tone, clear intent. That contrast is powerful, because after silence, words carry weight. Chapter 11. Silence builds. Self-mastery. Silence is not just a social tool. It is an internal one. When you stop reacting externally, you begin mastering internally. You notice impulses. You observe emotions without obeying them. You create space between feeling and action. That space is freedom, and freedom is power. Most people are controlled by what they feel in the moment. Strategic silence teaches you to choose your response. That choice changes everything. You now understand silence as control, as pressure, as emotional discipline. But there is a deeper level still. The silence you carry within. The silence that shapes how you think, decide, and move through life. Because the loudest battles are not external. They are internal. And mastery there changes who you become. Chapter 12. The inner silence. Before you master silence in conversation, you must master silence in your mind. Because the loudest noise is not around you. It is inside you. The endless self-talk, the replayed conversations, the imagined arguments, the need to explain yourself to people who are not even present. That noise drains power. Strategic silence begins internally, when you stop narrating your life for imaginary audiences. When you no longer rehearse defenses, when you no longer argue with shadows, when you stop trying to win conversations that never happened. Inner silence creates clarity, and clarity sharpens every decision you make. Chapter 13. Silence versus validation. Most people speak because they want confirmation. They want to be understood. They want to be approved. They want to feel significant. So they talk, and talk, and talk. Strategic silence does the opposite. It says, I do not need permission to be certain. I do not need applause to be confident. I do not need validation to move forward. Silence breaks dependency. The less you seek external confirmation, the less influence others have over your emotional state. And that independence is rare. People feel it immediately. They sense it, and they respect it, even if they don't understand it. Chapter 14. When silence reveals. Truth. Silence invites honesty. When you stop filling space with words, people reveal themselves. They talk more. They explain too much. They contradict earlier statements. They show motives through tone and timing. Most people talk themselves into exposure. Silence lets that happen. You don't need to interrogate. You don't need to corner. You don't need to accuse. You listen. And listening gives you leverage without conflict. This is why silence is dangerous to liars and manipulators. It gives them room to unravel. Chapter 15. The strength of not explaining. One of the highest forms of silence is refusing to over-explain. You don't justify every choice. You don't defend every boundary. You don't answer every why, because explanations invite debate, and debate invites erosion of authority. Sometimes the strongest answer is simple. Sometimes the strongest response is final. Sometimes the strongest move is no response at all. Silence teaches people how to treat you. Chapter 16. Silence in leadership. True leaders speak less than expected. They don't rush to comment on everything. They don't fill meetings with noise. They don't chase control through constant instruction. They observe. They pause. They let others speak first. And when they do speak, People listen, because silence has already commanded attention. In leadership, silence creates gravity. People lean in, they wait, and that waiting gives your words power. Chapter 17. Choosing silence over ego. Ego wants the last word. Silence chooses the last outcome. Ego wants to prove something. Silence lets results speak. Ego wants immediate satisfaction. Silence plays the long game. Every time you choose silence over ego, you strengthen self-control. And self-control compounds. It shows in how you walk, how you listen, how you respond under pressure. Eventually, silence becomes your default. Not because you are afraid to speak, but because you understand when speaking is unnecessary. Chapter 18. Silence as a personal code. Strategic silence is not weakness, it is a code. A way of moving through the world with restraint, with awareness, with intention. You speak when it matters. You listen when it doesn't. You observe always, and people feel that presence. Because silence is not absence. It is control. It is confidence without performance. It is power without noise. You are now beginning to see it clearly. Silence is not something you use occasionally. It is something you become. And once you do, the world responds differently. Chapter 19. Silence under pressure. Pressure reveals who you really are. When emotions rise, most people rush to speak. They react. They defend. They explain. Strategic silence does something else. It slows the moment down. When you pause instead of react, you take control of time. And whoever controls time controls the interaction. Silence under pressure unsettles others. They expect emotion. They expect resistance. They expect noise. Instead, they meet calm. And calm is dominance. Not aggressive dominance, not loud dominance, but quiet, grounded certainty. This is where silence becomes intimidating, not because you are threatening, but because you are unshakable. Chapter 20. The silence that ends. Conflicts. Most conflicts survive on fuel. Words are fuel. Reactions are fuel. Explanations are fuel. Silence starves conflict. When you stop feeding unnecessary exchanges, arguments lose oxygen. You don't need to win every disagreement. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to respond to every provocation. Some battles end the moment you refuse to participate. Silence closes doors without slamming them, and people feel the finality. Chapter 21. Silence and emotional control. Your emotions are always listening. Every word you speak reinforces a feeling. Every complaint strengthens frustration. Every justification deepens insecurity. Silence interrupts emotional loops. It gives you space between stimulus and response. That space is where mastery lives. You don't suppress emotion, you observe it. You don't deny feeling, you regulate it. Silence becomes your emotional buffer, and the more you use it, the less reactive you become. Chapter 22. The silent reputation. Over time, silence builds reputation. People begin to describe you differently. They say things like, "He doesn't say much, but when he does, it matters." "She's calm under pressure." They're hard to read, but always in control. This reputation is not manufactured. It is earned through restraint, and once established, it protects you. People think twice before testing boundaries, before provoking reactions, before assuming weakness. Silence becomes your signature. Chapter 23. Silence as strategic choice. Not all silence is equal. There is fearful silence, avoidance, and there is strategic silence. Intention. Strategic silence is a decision. You choose when to speak. You choose when to withhold. You choose what deserves energy. This selectivity sharpens focus. Your words gain weight because they are rare. Your presence gains strength because it is steady. You stop wasting energy on noise and redirect it toward results. Chapter 24. When silence speaks loudest. There are moments when silence communicates more than words ever could. after disrespect, after betrayal, after repeated boundary violations. Silence becomes closure. Not dramatic, not emotional, just final. And that finality echoes louder than confrontation, because silence says, I have moved on. I no longer need engagement. You no longer have access. This is the silence that ends chapters. Chapter 25. Becoming untouchable. When silence becomes habit, you become harder to manipulate. Guilt loses power. Provocation loses effect. Opinions lose control. You stop reacting to noise and start responding only to meaning. This is not isolation. This is elevation. You are still present, still engaged, still aware, but no longer accessible to chaos. Next chapter. Silence is not about saying nothing. It is about saying only what matters. It is about control over emotion, control over ego, control over timing. In a world addicted to noise, silence is leverage. And those who master it move differently. They listen more. They react less. They win quietly. Now the question is not whether you understand silence. The question is, when will you start using it deliberately? If this message resonated with you, share the moment where silence changed your life, or the moment you realized speaking less gave you more. What topic should we explore next? Because mastery is built one quiet decision at a time. Chapter 26. Silence and Power Dynamics. Power is not always loud. In fact, real power rarely announces itself. Watch the room closely. The loudest voice is usually compensating. The most emotional response is often insecurity disguised as certainty. The one who speaks last, or not at all, is usually the one deciding the outcome. Silence shifts power dynamics instantly. When you don't rush to explain yourself, people lean in. When you don't rush to defend yourself, people question their assumptions. When you don't rush to react, people reveal more than they intended. Silence forces others to fill the gap. And in that gap, truth leaks out. Chapter 27. Silence in Leadership. Great leaders are not verbose. They are precise. They listen before they speak. They observe before they act. They allow silence to do the heavy lifting. A leader who talks constantly drowns out insight. A leader who uses silence creates space for intelligence. Silence invites others to think, to contribute, to take responsibility. And when a leader finally speaks, the room listens. Because silence has trained attention. Chapter 28. Silence and Self-Respect. Every unnecessary explanation costs you something. Every time you overjustify, you teach people that your boundaries are negotiable. Every time you overshare, you dilute your authority. Every time you chase validation, you hand away control. Silence is self-respect in action. It says, I don't need approval to be grounded. I don't need agreement to stand firm. I don't need noise to feel confident. When you respect yourself enough to be silent, others follow your lead. Chapter 29. Silence after the win. Winning loudly invites resistance. Winning quietly builds longevity. Strategic silence after success protects momentum. You don't broadcast every move. You don't announce every plan. You don't celebrate before the work is done. Silence keeps your edge sharp. While others talk, you prepare. While others explain, you execute. While others react, you advance. The quiet win lasts longer. Chapter 30. Silence and Emotional Detachment. Detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. Silence helps you detach from outcomes you can't control, from opinions that don't matter, from reactions that aren't yours to manage. You stop taking everything personally. You stop absorbing unnecessary emotional weight. You stop confusing noise with importance. Silence teaches discernment, and discernment creates peace. Chapter 31. Silence as Inner Strength. Inner strength does not shout. It breathes, it waits, it endures. Silence builds that strength quietly, daily, invisibly. You don't need to prove growth. You don't need to announce healing. You don't need to explain transformation. Change speaks for itself. And silence gives it space to mature. Chapter 32. The Discipline of Restraint. Restraint is a muscle. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Your instinct is to respond, to clarify, to correct. But every time you choose silence instead of impulse, the muscle grows stronger. Soon, restraint becomes natural. You pause automatically. You choose carefully. You respond intentionally. Silence becomes discipline, and discipline becomes freedom. Chapter 33. Silence and long-term vision. Short-term reactions sabotage long-term goals. Silence protects vision. When you stop reacting to every distraction, you stay aligned with what actually matters. Silence keeps you focused, centered, unmoved by temporary noise. This is how long games are won, not by speed, but by steadiness. Chapter 34. Silence as a filter. Silence filters people. Those who thrive on chaos drift away. Those who seek drama lose interest. Those who respect depth remain. Your circle becomes smaller, but stronger. Silence removes the unnecessary, so the essential can stay. Chapter 35. The Final Mastery. Mastery is quiet. It does not seek attention. It does not demand recognition. It does not rush explanation. Mastery moves with intention, not impulse. And silence is its language. You don't need to speak more to win. You need to speak less, with purpose. That is the art. That is the edge. That is strategic silence. Chapter 36. Silence in conflict. Conflict feeds on noise. Arguments grow louder when ego feels threatened. Voices rise when insecurity takes control. Words become weapons when silence is ignored. But silence disarms conflict. When you don't react instantly, tension loses momentum. When you don't escalate, the other side is forced to slow down. When you don't match aggression, control shifts back to you. Silence does not mean surrender. It means you refuse to play a losing game. The calmest person in the conflict holds the advantage. Always. Chapter 37. Silence and Emotional Maturity. Emotional maturity is not about expression. It's about regulation. A mature mind doesn't speak every feeling. It chooses which emotions deserve airtime. Silence creates emotional space. Space to process. Space to reflect. Space to respond instead of react. This is where growth lives. Not in constant communication, but in conscious restraint. Chapter 38. Silence when you're misunderstood. One of the hardest tests of silence is being misunderstood. Your instinct screams to explain, to correct, to defend. But not every misunderstanding needs your voice. Sometimes clarity arrives without your intervention. Sometimes truth surfaces on its own. Sometimes silence protects you better than words ever could. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You need to be aligned with yourself. Silence guards that alignment. Chapter 39. Silence and Timing. Timing is everything. The right words at the wrong time destroy impact. The right silence at the right time multiplies it. Silence teaches patience. Patience teaches timing. Timing creates power. You stop forcing moments. You wait for leverage. You act when conditions favor you. That's strategy. Chapter 40. Silence as mental cleanliness. Noise clutters the mind. Opinions, reactions, unnecessary conversations. Silence clears the mental environment. It sharpens focus. It restores energy. It reconnects you to your inner compass. In silence, you hear yourself again. And that voice matters more than all the others combined. Chapter 41. Silence in a World. Addicted to noise. The world rewards loudness, but it is ruled by those who can remain quiet. Most people talk to feel relevant. The rare ones stay silent to stay powerful. Silence is no longer common, which makes it valuable. Those who master it stand apart. Chapter 42. Silence as a daily practice. Silence is not a moment, it's a practice. You practice it when you pause before replying, when you breathe before reacting, when you choose restraint over impulse. Daily silence builds long-term control, and control builds freedom. Chapter 43. Silence and inner authority. Authority doesn't come from dominance, it comes from certainty. Silence strengthens certainty. You stop seeking external validation, you stop explaining your worth, you stop negotiating your boundaries. Your presence becomes enough. That is inner authority. Chapter 44. Silence before the final move. Before every decisive action, there is silence. The moment of stillness, the pause before execution, the breath before commitment. Silence concentrates intent, and intent directs outcome. Those who rush reveal desperation. Those who wait reveal control. Chapter 45. The ultimate truth about silence. Silence is not emptiness. It is awareness. It is restraint. It is power held in reserve. You don't win by saying more. You win by knowing when not to speak. In a loud world, silence is dominance. And now, you know how to use it. End of audiobook. If this resonated with you, share the moment where silence changed how you see power. And tell us, what topic should we explore next? Epilogue. After the silence. And yet, there is one final layer to silence few ever reach. Because silence is not only what you withhold from others, it is what you protect inside yourself. After the words stop, after the reactions fade, after the world goes quiet, what remains is you. Your thoughts without interruption, your intentions without distortion, your truth without performance. This is where real power lives. When silence becomes identity. At first, silence feels uncomfortable, like something is missing, like you should say more, do more, explain yourself. But over time, silence stops being an action. It becomes who you are. You move slower, but with certainty. You speak less, but with impact. You observe more and miss nothing. People begin to feel your presence before you speak. Your calm unsettles chaos. Your restraint exposes insecurity. Not because you try, but because silence has reshaped you. The final shift. There comes a moment when you realize something profound. You no longer need to win arguments. You no longer need to prove intelligence. You no longer need to dominate conversations, because you've already won internally. You have mastered the pause. You have mastered yourself. And anyone who masters themselves has nothing left to fear. Silence as freedom. Freedom is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. Freedom is quiet. It's the ability to walk away without explanation, to wait without anxiety, to act without seeking approval. Silence gives you that freedom, not by taking something away, but by removing what never mattered. A final reflection. Ask yourself, what conversations drain you? What reactions cost you peace? What words have you been using to protect your ego instead of your future? Then ask a better question. What would happen if you said nothing? That question alone can change your life. The last lesson. Silence is not weakness. It is refinement. It is the mark of someone who has seen enough, felt enough, and learned enough to no longer need noise. Speak when it adds value. Act when the moment is right. And when in doubt, choose silence. Because silence doesn't just make you powerful, it makes you free. If this audiobook shifted the way you see communication, power, or control, share the moment that hit you the hardest. And tell us, what should we explore next? Next chapter. When silence becomes mastery. There is a level beyond strategy, beyond control, beyond restraint. It is the level where silence is no longer something you use. It is something you are. At this stage, you don't calculate when to speak. You don't count seconds before responding. You don't weigh words like weapons. You simply know. You know when presence alone is enough. You know when energy speaks louder than language. You know when silence carries more authority than 1,000 explanations. This is mastery. The quiet confidence few ever reach. Most people speak to feel safe. They talk to reduce uncertainty. They fill space to avoid discomfort. But the strongest individuals do the opposite. They are comfortable in the pause. They are grounded in stillness. They allow silence to stretch because they are not afraid of what might surface. And when someone is not afraid of silence, they are not afraid of anything. Silence reveals the truth. When you stop talking, something interesting happens. Others start revealing themselves. They talk more. They over-explain. They contradict themselves. They expose motives they didn't intend to share. Silence becomes a mirror, and most people cannot stand what they see reflected back. That is why silence feels powerful, not because it dominates, but because it uncovers. The ultimate advantage. In a world addicted to noise, the quiet mind has an unfair advantage. While others react, you observe. While others rush, you wait. While others speak to be seen, you act to be effective. Your decisions improve. Your timing sharpens. Your influence deepens. Not because you learn to say less, but because you learn to think more. When silence becomes legacy, eventually people stop asking why you're quiet. They stop questioning your restraint. They stop challenging your calm. Because results answer for you. Your silence becomes associated with outcomes, with precision, with authority. And that is the highest form of respect. The closing truth. Silence is not the absence of power. It is power refined. It is discipline without ego, confidence without performance, strength without noise. And once you understand this, you will never feel the need to speak just to be heard again. If this audiobook changed the way you see silence, influence, or control, share the moment that stayed with you the longest. And tell us, what should the next audiobook uncover? Epilogue. The silence you carry forward. There is one final lesson silence teaches, and it's the one most people never reach. Silence is not something you turn on and off. It becomes the standard. Once you understand its power, you can never go back to unnecessary noise. You hear conversations differently. You feel moments more deeply. You sense when words would weaken what presence alone can strengthen. You no longer rush to respond. You no longer argue to prove. You no longer explain to be accepted. You move with certainty, quietly. The inner shift. At first, silence feels external. You bite your tongue. You hold your response. You count seconds. But eventually, something changes inside. Your mind slows. Your emotions settle. Your reactions soften. Not because you are passive, but because you are in control. And control is calm. Silence and self-mastery. The greatest benefit of strategic silence is not influence over others. It is mastery over yourself. You stop leaking energy into conversations that go nowhere. You stop feeding egos that thrive on reaction. You stop wasting breath on people committed to misunderstanding you. Your focus sharpens. Your boundaries strengthen. Your life becomes lighter. This is not withdrawal from the world. It is clarity within it. When you do speak and when you finally speak, people listen. Because your words are rare. Because they are measured. Because they land with weight. You don't repeat yourself. You don't raise your voice. You don't chase attention. Your silence has already prepared the room. A quiet challenge. As you step forward from this audiobook, take this with you. The next time you feel the urge to speak immediately, pause. The next time you feel misunderstood, wait. The next time emotion demands expression, breathe. Not to suppress yourself, but to choose yourself. Because silence, when chosen consciously, is not weakness, it is wisdom in motion.